I'm Doug Lichtman, and this patent video is on the topic of disclosure. And what I mean by that is we have a bunch of rules that make clear what you have to put in to a patent application. What do you have to disclose as you knock on our door and ask for this powerful protection? What do you have to teach us? How are we going to judge that document? And there are a bunch of legal rules that do that work, and we're going to run through them in this installment. As I get started, I want to point out to you that there are kind of two theories here about what this law is trying to accomplish. I actually think one of them is right and one of them not so much, but let me share both with you so you can be a little bit of your own judge. One theory is that the document is the goal. And on this theory, what I want is this beautiful teaching document. I want this document that explains the invention so that other people could get it and read it and learn, oh, that's how you build a mousetrap. Oh, that's why a mousetrap works. Some people imagine the document as what they call the quid pro quo. You give me this wonderful teaching, and in exchange, I will give you these patent rights. Some people think of the trade-off in that way. I'm a little less enamored of that, and mainly because I don't believe that anyone's reading these documents. We have like 500,000 patent applications come through the system every year. They're written by lawyers. They're kind of impenetrable in some ways, even if you know what you're reading. I don't think that like the nice men and women who are researchers at NVIDIA get up in the morning and, oh, let's read the latest patents. That doesn't make sense to me. And there are a whole bunch of reasons why that's probably not a good idea anyway. Reading the patents might expose you, it turns out, to different kinds of litigation risk. But there is this view that what we want is the document. We want to create this material. I don't think that's right, but that is one commonly held view. The second view is to think of the document as a legal document. And under this view, the reason we're doing all of this is we want to give you patent rights so you then disclose the information in more dynamic ways. Once you have a patent, you can knock on someone else's door and say, hey, a big company, I have a really good idea, let me show you. And you don't have to worry that they're going to steal it from you because you got a patent. You could climb to the top of the nearest mountain and yell out, I've cured Alzheimer's. And you don't have to worry that someone's going to take the idea from you. I like to think of this as a legal document that creates rights, and the rights in turn are what then helps us get ideas out to other folks, not the document itself. And on that theory, then the document should be understood through the lens of the law. We're not trying to write something that we'd publish in a wonderful magazine for engineers. What we're trying to do is write a document that we can apply all these legal rules to figure out what rights should you get. The document helps us scope your patent claims. And so it's kind of a different way of thinking about it. I like this way much better. I think it's more true to the system. But there are these two ways of understanding disclosure in patent law. As I've said in a prior video, I'm going to try in all of these conversations to make sure you know where this comes up. And here, this comes up again in all of our settings. It might be when you apply at the patent office, the patent examiner says to you, I don't think your teaching is good enough. I looked at your drawings, I looked at your prose, I looked at the claims you asked me for, and there's a mismatch. I'm not going to give you those claims based on this teaching. The patent examiner is going to look at it. We might look at it in those IPRs where we bring a patent back to the patent office for another set of evaluations. There too, fair game to look at some of this, although there are some limits right now on what we're allowed to look at in IPR versus in court, which is the other place this comes up. In court, I can look at all this stuff again and say to the court, I know the government gave them these claims, but I don't think they disclosed enough to actually justify that. Their teaching isn't good enough to warrant these claims. Here are the mismatches, here are the holes. So this is going to show up in all these settings again, and as I pointed out to you in the past, that means it shows up everywhere. You knock on my door and ask me for a license, I say I'll do it for a small number. If you're on a big number, I might fight with you because I don't think your disclosure was good enough that you shouldn't have gotten those claims anyway. This shows up in all of the patent settings. All right, what are the requirements? One of them is a requirement we call utility. And the idea here is you have to show that your achievement is useful. Now be careful, you don't have to show it's great. You don't have to show it'll be commercially successful. It's just this very, very low threshold of usefulness. Where does it come from? Courts kind of made it up. It's in Section 101, if you squint really hard, where Congress wrote about subject matter, the topic of another video, like what things can be in the patent system. Congress said, among other things, new and useful processes, methods, and so on. And so courts said, useful. You got to show us that it has a use. That's the hook, kind of thin, but okay, that's the hook for the utility requirement. What did the courts then do? Well, they made 3 flavors of utility. One of them is this idea of operability. We ask, does the invention actually operate? And this really knocks out 2 kinds of things. One is like the crazy stuff. If you write a patent and your claim is for a time travel, you'll get a rejection within the patent office saying, I don't think that works. It's not useful because it doesn't work. Come see me yesterday if you disagree. Right? We'll knock things out because we don't think they work. Sometimes you get a rejection on operability because you made a typo. You wrote about your invention and you articulated a bunch of wheels and you accidentally misidentified one of them, so you have a wheel turning that can't possibly turn. Oops, and you'll fix it and keep going the process. One flavor is operability. Does it work? Note, we assume almost everything works. Patent Office doesn't have time to get every invention and go build it and test it and try every bit of chemistry. And so our default is, I assume that it's working, but the examiner has the right to say, I'm skeptical of that perpetual motion machine, and start a process to question it. Operability. A second piece, which we don't do much anymore, but I'll mention in passing, there was a time when we judged beneficial utility. Like, is this good for society? And we would question some things, think of like cubic zirconium, fake diamonds, or gambling machines. We question some things. We don't really do that anymore for a whole bunch of reasons. One, it's not clear that the Patent Office is well placed to judge these big picture questions. Is this good or not for society? That's not really what the Patent Office was supposed to do. They're supposed to ask, is it new, is it not obvious? Kind of patent law questions. And it's always messy too. Like my favorite case in beneficial utility was a dispute where the patent was in one of those drink machines you see at the mall, where up in the top there's like a container with like some delicious looking slushy stuff, and it's being rotated around and kind of moved, and it looks, and you can come up and order the slushy stuff. And it turns out those machines are complete frauds. When they serve you the slushy stuff, it's not the stuff you see in the container up top. That container is not adequately refrigerated. They get you sick. And so they use what looks like the drink and they mix it in front of you in the big glass container to entice you, but they're actually serving you something from underneath. And someone had a patent on this machine because it attracts people to come buy the drink. And someone else challenged the patent and they said, well, that's fraudulent. That's not beneficial to society. It's a big lie. And the irony is, if we blow up the patent because it's a big lie, what's going to happen is we'll get more of those fraudulent machines. The case was against someone who wanted to make those machines. And the patent holder said, you can't, those are mine. And the other guy said, well, that's a terrible thing. Well, there should be no patent, because then I could make more of them. It was a messy area of law. We've abandoned it. We have a lot of other law that regulates inventions. If I invent a drug, I can't sell it to you unless the FDA says I can. If I invent some other tool, it'll fall under products liability and consumer protection. And we got plenty of other law that builds in other policy considerations beyond, is it new and unobvious? Patent law says, fine, let those guys do that stuff. We'll stay in our lane. So we don't really do this one anymore. The third one, though, is the one we do see from time to time. It's this idea of practical and specific utility. And the big intuition here is that you can't pitch some big complicated invention and tell me it's a paperweight, or it can be used to fill a big hole in the ground. It can, but that isn't commensurate with all the stuff you just wrote me. We want you to tell me a story about some practical or specific use. It doesn't have to be very practical. It doesn't have to be commercially plausible. It could be utterly ridiculous, but at least make it tailored to the rest of your document. We need an actual use. And the main worry here was people either warehousing So they would patent a bunch of molecules, not know what any of them do, and hope that someday you find out a use for one of them so they could sue you. Warehousing, or just coming too early. There are a handful of cases where someone, like a famous example, is someone made a method to produce a molecule, and it was a really cool method. It was a brand new method to make the molecule, but we didn't have any use for the molecule yet. And on utility, the court said, no, it's not useful. Great, you have a new way of making a molecule, but who cares? Why do I need it? And here the court was in essence saying, you knocked on my door too early. Don't stop and get a patent now. Keep going a little further, have some inkling as to why the molecule is interesting. Then maybe we'll let you patent. So you could then take that patent, go to some other expert and say, I've got this molecule. You're a cancer researcher. I think this might help you. Will you take the baton and run with it now and do your step? We understand that we want patents on pieces, parts. I do my piece. I figured out how to make the molecule. You do your piece. You figure out how to use it to help mice in the lab. Then the next guy does their piece, which they take your mice understanding and apply it to people. We understand that there are going to be steps along the way. They don't all have to be useful in the sense of helping people on the ground today. But courts use this a little bit to say, yeah, that step too small, that step too early, that step not real. You're just warehousing. You have no idea what you're doing. Utility polices timing a little bit. Don't patent until you know at least a little something. That's the utility requirement. One piece of what we make you disclose. Another way we judge your disclosure is this rule called enablement. And we say that your teaching has to enable someone skilled in the art, again, not me, not you, not mom, someone skilled in the art to practice the invention. So you're going to claim the invention, but you have to teach me enough that the right reader, an educated reader in the space, could read your document and understand how to do it. You've shown us enough. And again, it depends how you think about it. If you're of the view that, and that's because we want people to read patents, well, then it makes total sense. Say enough that I could read it. My view is, it's just a check on scope. If you can't explain to me enough of how it works, then I don't want to give you the patent yet. If the thing you're claiming is something you can't explain, maybe you didn't actually invent it. Maybe you should be doing a little more work first. I think it's about the scope of the patent. I want to give you rights commensurate to what you brought to society. And one way to answer what did you bring to society is, what did you enable? Based on what you wrote down, having done this thing, what can someone skilled in the art actually understand? I think this is all about the law, but again, I'll acknowledge that a lot of smart, wonderful people think it's about getting a really good document to read. I'm just skeptical. Enablement, it's another important way we test your disclosure. This one's in section 112, a lot of stuff there, let's read it, we'll talk about it. 112 said that the specification, and that's our fancy word for your drawings, the English language paragraphs in your application, and your claims, all kind of smushed together. The specification, this original disclosure, the specification shall contain a written description of the invention and of the manner and process of making and using it, again, a reference to utility maybe, making and using it in such full, clear, concise, and exact terms as to enable any person skilled in the art to which it pertains or with which it's most nearly connected to make and use the same. I'm going to ignore the last little bit because we really don't enforce it anymore. So stop at the word the same. What is 112 saying? Well, it says a bunch of things. For current purposes, it's that enablement language that I really want to focus on, as to enable a person skilled in the art to make and use the invention. That's our test. You can get the claimed thing if you can write me a document that good. If you can't, you can claim something less, but I'm going to judge your claim based on how well you were able to write me a supportive document so someone skilled in the art would understand how to make and use it. And indeed, the courts now kind of say it this way. They say that a claim is enabled if someone skilled in the art can practice the invention without undue experimentation. Or maybe I read it, I have to get my ruler and do a little measurement, get my compass. Yeah, a little bit, but without undue experimentation. Get me close enough that in the court's judgment, someone skilled in the art would read it and understand it enough that, again, I think we're saying you deserve it. You've told me enough that you've deserved it. Now, enablement is a really hard thing to do. This is why some lawyers can charge the big bucks. If you knock on my door and you bring me the mousetrap, the original one, it's got cheese, it's got a spring-loaded door, it's got a portable container so I can carry the mouse later. If you bring me a mousetrap, it's easy to write a patent that covers literally what you brought me. I write about cheese and the spring, I even sketch the thing you put on my desk, easy. But that patent really doesn't buy you enough. Because if I just patent what you brought me, your rival says, fine, I won't use cheese, I'll use crushed chicken, I'll use crackers, I'll use gummy bears, I don't know. I won't use a spring-loaded door, I'll use a different way of closing the container. Right? What you really invented, if you invented the mousetrap, is something bigger. And I want to write you that bigger claim. Right? I might claim exactly what you brought me, because that's a really good embodiment. I might literally be litigating that thing. But what you brought me was this bigger picture concept that we're going to lure the mouse to the trap. We're going to put something in the trap that brings the mouse to us. That we're going to close the door behind the mouse. The mouse can't leave once they're brought in, but we're not going to hurt it. We're not chasing it with a broom and whacking it and having mess after that, let alone guilt. No, we're going to capture it. It's going to be a portable container so I can then bring the mouse to my next door neighbor's property. And so enablement then becomes really important. You want the lawyer to help you figure out how to tell the bigger story and write enough that you can claim that bigger thing. I don't just want to claim a trap that has cheese and a spring-loaded door. I also want to claim at a higher level a container that uses a lure, has a closing mechanism. And I want to come up a level to get a meaningful property right that blocks out look-alike achievements. And to do that, enablement is my key barrier. I've got to write enough that the reader says, I can study the one they built, I see all that teaching, and I also have been taught enough that I can follow this level of abstraction and figure out other lures. Might be food, might be sounds, might be smells. I understand what a lure does, I understand how to test if they work. Enablement is a really important piece to capturing what our inventor brought in and giving them a patent that has the right scope. Again, my read of the world. The document teaches enough that we can now give you the claim set you probably should get. Not this tiny little thing that just captures what you built, but the bigger thing that captures the achievement you actually were responsible for. It's a hard thing to do. The best lawyers do it particularly well. It's something you do in conversation with your inventor to really tease out what their achievement was. It's a really important step in drafting and then later evaluating patents. One other piece. In 112, we also mentioned the idea of written description. This is different from enablement. Obviously, as I enable, I'm describing the invention. I'm writing about it, sure. But we add this extra piece. We also kind of make sure that what you ultimately claim matches what you wrote down. In an earlier video, I pointed out that we let you file a patent on Monday, come back on Thursday and say, I'm changing my claims, but I'd like to tie this to my Monday filing. Pretend I filed this on Monday, even though I didn't, because all I'm doing is changing my claims. We allow you to adjust your claims over time. We then police that with this thing, written description, to make sure that you're not kind of cheating a little bit, like you looked around, you realized something new and are sneaking it into your claims. Written description just kind of lines up your claims with what you told us to make sure they match. And here's a really concrete example that we see just to help you see what work this thing does. Imagine your original disclosure was for a method of treating some ailment, and you said they should take anywhere from 1 to 1,000 milligrams. Then you come back a year later and you add new claims and you say 52 milligrams. That's it. 52, so important, because that's the one you got through the FDA. We might come back and say, look, you enabled all of it. When you said 1 to 1,000, you taught enough that someone skilled in the art could scoop that out. You enabled it. But what we don't understand is why you said 1 to 1,000 back then, and suddenly now it's 52. Suddenly now 52 is magical. You had 52 in your bigger range. You can have that set of claims. But if there's some problem with 1 to 1,000, let's say it turns out there's prior art at 40 and 90 and 2,000, well, 2,000 wouldn't matter too, I guess, 40 and 90 and 900, there you go. And so that old claim isn't good to you because it accidentally covers prior art. We might not let you come back and suddenly magically say 52, 52, that's my cool number 52. Written description. We want to make sure that you're not cheating, either because you learned something afterward and you're using that to reshape your patent, or because you're sneaking in some new information. You didn't learn it, but you didn't really know it back then, and now you yourself are bringing it. We're worried about you getting lucky, like your original patent talked about 1 to 1,000, and it included 52, but that's not what you were thinking about. We have all these set of concerns about, in essence, timing, which is to say, if you filed today and said 52, okay, we judge you on the merits. We'd ask about prior art, what do we know as of today? We'd ask about your disclosure, where you would say 52 explicitly. But this rule says if the way you got the claim in was by adding it later in the game, we're going to make sure that the claim intellectually matches your description. And what's wild about it is you might have enabled. Someone else reading your patent would have understood, but that's not this question. It's enabled, but were you thinking about it? Was this why you applied? Was this in your conception of the achievement? Because if not, I don't need to give you the rights. You knocked on my door and filed the patent under one set of assumptions, aiming for one concept of what you were doing. This wasn't it. You filed, thank you. We're not going to let you backdate your corrections. And so written description polices the match between your claims and your explicit descriptions, even if it's true that your original disclosure enabled. It catches some of this funny business when people are playing with the claims after the fact. I'll add, by the way, written description is kind of a belt and suspenders rule to help us do enablement well. So enablement is very scientific for the court. We ask what someone skilled in the art would understand, and we'll try. But another way just to double check is, did you describe it? Because if you didn't describe it, maybe that means it wasn't enabled. Or maybe better, going the other way, if you did describe it, I'm more likely to believe you enabled it. You knew it enough that you did it. Look, it's described. If I can satisfy written description, if I can look at your description, that might give me more confidence in whatever I'm going to say about enablement. Enablement requires us to do the hard science lifting. Written description is more match the claim to what they wrote. And so sometimes written description is belt and suspenders for enablement. It's another way to double check. Did they understand it? They wrote enough, they described it, and now do I believe that other people would understand it too? There's a little bit of overlap here, but technically they are different rules. One judges what you wrote and understood, the other judges what other people would understand based on what you wrote. All right, that's a quick tour through how we think of the document. What must you disclose? Give us a use, doesn't have to be a great one, give us a use. Make sure that you've enabled your claims. You've said enough that someone skilled in the art can actually practice the invention without undue experimentation. And then we'll check that your claims are described. There's enough of a match that we don't think you're playing games later on and sneaking details into your claims that weren't necessarily on your mind when you applied. We're watching for mismatches. All right, that's all we want to say about disclosure.